All right, good afternoon, everybody. I know we're coming to the end of a hot day. If you want to get water or lemonade or any refreshment right at the corner, please do so, and then come join us up close and personal. Thank you. Sorry about the confusion about location, going 180 degrees that way and then 100 degrees this way. And here we are back in our home hall. All right, I'm Molly Eberly. I serve on the Thoreau Alliance board, having come to it from the Thoreau Farm Board. And our title is Economic Health, something we all could use, right? I'm going to just quickly give you a couple of sentences of bio of our four panelists, and then they're going to speak in order: Eric, Paul, Alissa, and Ken. So let's start. Eric Miller, many of you know him, is a professor of communication studies at Commonwealth University of Pennsylvania. His work focuses on discourses around these four topics: Christianity, conservatism, capitalism, and climate change in the United States. That's a lot of C's. His book is Degrowing America: Rhetoric, Ideology, and Practical Wisdom in the Era of Climate Change. And that's going to be published by Palgrave Macmillan next year. So that's what we're going to talk about there. His topic is the profit of degrowth: Thoreau, simplicity, and economy. So the idea of degrowth instead of more growth. Next, Mr. Carr, Paul Carr. He's our long-term Thoreau Society 33 years member. And before retiring, he was a supervisory physicist at the Air Force Research Lab at Hanscom Air Force Base, which is the property contiguous to the Thoreau Farm, just down the road. And while he was working there, he led a branch that led the development of the tiny surface acoustic wave, SAW, components. And these are used in radar and now in cell phones. So if you have any cell phone questions, ask Paul. And last year, 2025, he published Containing Climate Change to Save Us. And that's available at Amazon, as are so many things. His topic is Economics to Heal Ecology. All right, Alissa is our resident artist. Alissa O'Brien, artist and natural science illustrator. She's a graduate of Rhode Island School of Design, and she currently has an exhibit of wood-burning nature art over at the Walden Pond shop. So please stop by if you're doing one of the walks around Walden. Head on in and see her exhibit. It'll be there till the end of the month. The best thing is that last year, Alissa was, this year, recipient of the Thoreau Country Conservation Alliance Fellowship. And her topic is voluntary poverty: being poor with purpose. And our last speaker, Ken Lizotte, is the Chief Imaginative Officer, CIO, of Emerson Consulting Group here in Concord. And he's authored 10 books, including most recently, released this year, Walden for Hire: Business Lessons from Henry David Thoreau. That was published by HarperCollins. Aha. Amazon has good reviews. Check it out. And I had the privilege of serving with Ken on the Thoreau Farm board for at least 10 years. He was the board president. And that, of course, is Henry's birthplace. Ken, during his time there, he guided the editing and publication of the Thoreau Farm's 2-volume book series. You've probably seen copies of it. What Would Henry Do? Lessons for the 21st Century. And we're going to be working on volume 3 with more essays coming. Ken's topic is the market value of Henry's cabin: affordable, sunk cost, or ongoing profit. So think about that. Let's start off with Eric Miller.
Good afternoon. During an interview for the 2019 documentary Anthropocene, Earth system scientist Will Steffen was asked whether the story of humanity appeared to him more of a comedy or a tragedy. I would certainly view it as a tragedy, he said. If there were another species coming down from another planet, they may see it as a comedy, or they may see it as an incredible paradox of a species that could learn to manipulate their planet so much, but didn't have the wisdom to understand what that manipulation was leading to in terms of its own well-being. Stefan, who died of pancreatic cancer in 2023, had devoted much of his career to making people wise and, like many other scientists in the early 21st century, had begun reconciling himself to the limits of his influence. They saw clearly how precarious our situation had become, knew plainly how it had become so, and discerned exactly what will be required to set things right in the years ahead. But the task was very difficult, and the future was veiled with uncertainties. To read through the expanding literature on the Anthropocene, the human epoch in geologic time, is to be resituated in a young world, a new civilization shedding the skin of past millennia and growing exponentially into and beyond its fullest potentials. Since about 1945, human beings have broken and discarded the physical limits that had governed their ancestors, dramatically escalating their extraction of natural resources, streamlining the refinement and manufacture of these into products, and extending their system of commerce across a global web of connections powered all along by the shimmer and the smoke of burning fossil fuels. Tapped in the 18th century and revolutionized in the 20th, the ability to extract and exploit millions of years of subterranean energy transformed the relationship between humans and their planet, necessarily disrupting the ecological and atmospheric balances that had made human beings possible in the first place. Stefan and his colleagues famously dubbed this rapid new metabolism the Great Acceleration, noting the direct correspondence between exponential increases in socioeconomic trends like global population, gross domestic product, and primary energy use, and Earth system trends like atmospheric greenhouse gas concentration, average surface temperature, and ocean acidification. All told, they produced 24 comparable hockey stick graphs to demonstrate the post-war decades have been unique in their outsized production and impacts around the planet. In light of these observations, the world that we inhabit, that of 4 generations or of a single human lifetime, is defined by the benefits and liabilities of rapid, atypical, entirely unsustainable growth. Once seen, these graphs are difficult to unsee, and they tell a story to anyone who is willing to listen. In isolation, any one pairing of an Earth system trend with a socioeconomic trend might be dismissed as an instance of correlation, not causation. In the aggregate, however, they provide a comprehensive picture of exactly what post-war capitalism has wrought upon the world, both for good and for ill. J.R. McNeill and Peter Engelke, too, consider the Great Acceleration, recognizing its echo of the Great Transformation theorized earlier by Carl Polanyi in reference to changes inaugurated by the Industrial Revolution. Writing in 2014, McNeill and Engelke note the remarkable aberration of the then 70-year post-war era, as well as the surreptitiousness with which it had been able to pass in the minds of most people. This period since 1945 corresponds roughly to the average life expectancy of a human being, they write. Only 1 in 12 persons now alive can remember anything before 1945. The entire life experience of almost everyone now living has taken place within the eccentric historical moment of the Great Acceleration during what is certainly the most anomalous and unrepresentative period in the 200,000-year-long history of relations between our species and the biosphere. If this was true in 2014, it has necessarily become so all the more every year since. Because we are all contemporary to the most unusual period in all of human history, the abnormal seems to us perfectly normal. Our common sense is calibrated to uncommon circumstances, and our orientation is to that extent misoriented. So it should concern us all that the conditions to which we are accustomed and the certainties on which we rely are even now passing fast into history. As this realization spreads, some of the most interesting and relevant work undertaken by economists, ecologists, ethicists, and policymakers has become increasingly focused on what comes next, on what, if anything, will replace the relentless revolution of capitalist production, accumulation, exploitation, and waste. The partisans have formed ranks within several different categories, by turns advocating post-capitalism, steady-state economics, and green growth, among others. But perhaps the most energetic and provocative of these are the advocates of degrowth, the idea that economies should be deliberately decelerated and reoriented to prioritize human flourishing rather than boundless expansion. Or in the words of French economist Timothée Parrique, a downscaling of production and consumption to reduce ecological footprints, planned democratically in a way that is equitable while securing well-being. The shorthand for this, as it is sometimes expressed, is that those of us in the wealthy global north must learn to live simply so that those in the vulnerable global south, to say nothing of the numberless others inhabiting countless still nascent futures, may be afforded the right simply to live. Likely, the recitation of that cliche before this audience will bring to mind the life and work of Henry David Thoreau, who foresaw as early as the 1840s that the ever-accelerating pace of American commerce was bound toward a state of wanton disharmony with nature. Indeed, it was in the summer of 1845, precisely 1 century prior to the Great Accelerating, that Thoreau moved to the nearby shore of Walden Pond to begin his great experiment in simple living. His written, heavily revised, and often aphoristic account of that life appeared in 1854, famously counseling readers to simplify, simplify. Indeed, he wrote, "The nation itself, with all its so-called internal improvements, which, by the way, are all external and superficial, is just such an unwieldy and overgrown establishment, cluttered with furniture and tripped up by its own traps, ruined by luxury and heedless expense, by want of calculation and a worthy aim as the million households in the land. And the only cure for them is in a rigid economy, a stern and more Spartan simplicity of life and elevation of purpose." Notable for its early diagnosis of an overgrown America and its prescription of a rigid economy, these words are not otherwise distinctive in a book so thoroughly dedicated to this line of critique. Walden's long first chapter is famously devoted to economy in the old sense, to the minimization of expense rather than to the maximization of income. Leonard Neufeld has observed that Walden parodies the popular guidebooks of the day, several of which Thoreau owned and all of which presumed to serve ambitious young men with valuable advice, often about how to get rich quick. Thoreau's smirking riposte suggests that the truly ambitious young man is rich already, if only in proportion to the number of things which he can afford to let alone. With his eager emphasis on simplicity, on quiet, on wisdom, on the appreciation of and respect for nature, and on the importance of living in within our individual and collective means, Thoreau charted a course away from a tempest of impending problems that he could intuit, if not yet perceive in detail. It is undeniably somewhat anachronistic to suggest that Thoreau is the prophet of degrowth, or the oracle of climate change, or some Nostradamus of mass extinction, microplastics, automation, artificial intelligence, epidemic loneliness, or any other material, ecological, or spiritual byproduct of the Great Acceleration. But it is also impossible to read his masterpiece deliberately and reservedly and not conclude that he was on to something. For modern-day proponents of the degrowth movement, figures like Tim Jackson, Jason Hickel, Yorgos Kallis, Matthias Schmelzer, Kohei Saito, Timothée Parrique, and others, Walden feels prophetic in at least 2 senses of the term. The first, obviously, is that Thoreau seems to foresee dangerous futures, to predict that present patterns of behavior will proceed inexorably toward ominous outcomes. His critique of the status quo grapples persistently with inefficiencies and absurdities that others seem to accept without question when approaching every important facet of their lives. By highlighting the straight and simple path in case after essential case, he documents better roads not seriously considered, much less taken. In each of these, his selection of the route opposite that of his neighbors inverts a logic, draws a contrast, and so shows the reader how to proceed. This attempted reorientation, this clear warning that the current course bends towards trouble, is delivered with clear implications at once economic, ecological, individual, and spiritual. Had the book been more immediately influential in policy circles, either upon publication or in any of the 17 decades after, we may well have acquired the wisdom better to manage the Great Acceleration, to alleviate its more harmful effects, and to live deeper, healthier, more fulfilling lives than those shaped by neoliberal dictates. We too might be convinced, both by faith and experience, that to maintain oneself on this earth is not a hardship, but a pastime, if we will live simply and wisely. In the second sense, because he linked then present behaviors to future consequences, Thoreau necessarily adopts a somewhat confrontational posture towards his townsmen and his neighbors as representatives of his entrepreneurial, acquisitive, and increasingly industrial young nation. This posture is prophetic because it exhibits, in James Darcy's words, a sense of mission, a desire to bring the practice of the people into accord with a sacred principle, and an uncompromising, often excoriating stance toward a reluctant audience. How else to describe Thoreau's famous declaration that the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, his avowal that the greater part of what his neighbors call good he believes in his soul to be bad, or his stated attempt to address his contemporaries rooster-like, if only to wake them up. In all of this, Thoreau demonstrates the very rhetorical challenge of change-making that likely inspired prophetic speech from the first. When the status quo is entrenched, when conversion is resisted as a matter of course, when humans seem irredeemably compelled to reverence their lives as they are and to deny the possibility of change, even though there are as many ways to live as there are radii from the center, then perhaps the writer or the orator abandons the language of diplomacy and speaks the truth without varnish, as though liberated from or operating above the crass and sophistic imperative to persuade. Whatever else happens, the prophet seems to suggest, whatever choices you, the audience, will make, I must do my duty to deliver the word. Today, the Degrowth Chorus encourages those of us in the wealthier regions of the world to write our course by following some familiar steps, to reduce our production and our consumption, to slow the frenetic pace of our lives, to commonize and share our vital resources, to curtail our working hours, and to redirect our ambitions away from material possession and toward the very things that people always say they value the most: their health, their relationships, their freedom, and the flourishing of their communities, to name only a few. Degrowth writers encourage us, in other words, to embrace a more Spartan simplicity of life and elevation of purpose, to simplify. In 1867, just over a decade after the publication of Thoreau's great book, and only a few years after his untimely passing, Karl Marx would capture the capitalist credo in his first volume of Capital with the words, accumulate, accumulate. That is Moses and the prophets. Read as a sort of pre-joinder to that axiom, Thoreau's words feel like prophecy, and since then his prescience and his principle have aged like wine. Thank you.
Thoreau the prophet. Paul is next. Okay, can you find Paul? Sorry, we have to switch our order on the slides there. Paul, come on up. We'll figure it out. All right. These are economics to heal, right?
Yes.
There
I
we
think
go.
I'm going to have to walk around so I can see my slides. Can we take this out? This works. Okay, my topic today, economics to heal our ecology. This is a photo of me at the Thoreau annual gathering back in 22. And my main saying here, nature is but another name for health. Next. And I'll be citing quite a bit of my material that's already in my book, Containing Climate Change to Save Us. Next. Well, this slide shows the cumulative number of natural disasters and extreme weather events. And you can see how they've been growing up, sadly, quite dramatically since 1990. Particularly the red is the extreme temperatures, and I think we've noticed in New England we're getting a lot more of these 90-degree days in New England, but this is the trend since 1990, a dramatic increase, and accompanying that are floods and storms shown here. Record high temperatures and increasing weather disasters are alarming symptoms of the bad health of our ecology. Next. Next. CO2, carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel burning are heating our Earth via the greenhouse effect. That's the physical cause, and these are all turns out the increasing temperatures give more energy to the basically these storms basically take, particularly hurricanes, take the increasing temperatures of the ocean, gets translated into the increasing energy of the wind. And in other words, the thermal energy gets transformed into the kinetic energy of the wind. So they're physically related. There's a physical relation between the increased temperature and the increase in the intensity of the storms. Next. Can I have the next slide? The first chapter of Walden, Economy, functions as both a personal financial ledger and an environmental blueprint. Healing our warming planet requires Thoreau's radical reevaluation of cost. Next slide. His statement, the cost of a thing is the amount of what I call life, which is required to be exchanged for it immediately or in the long run. And you can see the cost in terms of time, and here they symbolize the extreme weather events. Cheap fossil fuels exact a massive toll paid not just in capital, but in rapid degradation of planetary stability, manifesting record high temperatures like we're seeing today, and catastrophic weather disasters. And by the way, having gone to Thoreau annual gatherings in the Masonic, unconditioned Masonic Hall, I am really thankful to the organizers who brought us to this air-conditioned place. But we did experience those, the Thoreau annual gathering is generally was when we had 90-degree weather. So just try to remember what it was like to meet in those hot Masonic Hall buildings. We did have fans, by the way. Next view graph. Well, we're not paying the true social cost of burning fossil fuels. The weather disasters, health impacts, agricultural loss, property damage, and ecosystem disruption. We're not paying for that in the market price. It's the artificially cheap cost paid at the pump or meter. The market failure. Fossil fuels remain our primary energy source simply because of their true devastating cost to society is entirely externalized and passed on to the next generation. As long as fossil fuels remain artificially cheap and profitable, their use will rise. For this James Hansen, climate scientist, said that the true social cost, we're not paying it. Well, how might we pay the true social cost? The next slide shows the proposal that basically you have a fee on all carbon emissions. So that raises the price of gasoline and all fossil fuels, and we've seen that in the last few months. And basically it raises the cost of gasoline, and we've seen that. Remember, the cost of gasoline used to be like, what was it, $2.79, and for a while it was over $4. And there's data showing that people bought less gasoline. The people drove less because it was so expensive. And how should this really be done fairly? Well, let me just ask you simply: who benefited? I mean, the oil pumpers were making a profit when gasoline was $2.69. Who? And they were able to sell that oil at a substantial profit. Who benefited from that profit? The oil companies. That's right. The oil companies. The oil companies. And the stock, by the way, the stock of oil company, the stock of the oil companies also went up too. But basically, so the fair way of doing this, shown here by several Nobel laureates in economics, is you put a fee on the polluters. You collect the revenue. The government, or it doesn't have to be the government, but an organization collects that revenue, and then it's returned to the public to pay for their higher energy bills, and so households are protected from the and then of course as the cost goes up, people don't buy as many fossil fuels, and they go to green energy and buy. Do you know what the cheapest cost of generating electricity is these days? Solar and wind. They're the cheapest way to generate. So fortunately, in the last few years, wind and solar are the cheapest way of generating electricity. So we finally have an economic advantage. So next slide. So here is an example of solar panels. This is last year. This is a few of the 126 solar panels installed to provide green electricity for my Bedford Presbyterian Church in New Hampshire. This church, you can see, was founded in 1750. So the 2022 Inflation Reduction and Climate Act provided substantial federal funds for these solar PV panels. And of course, instead of well, this is how the government did encourage the use of green energy. And of course, the solar and wind incentives have been repealed. However, nuclear, there's still government support for green and other sources of green energy, which is nuclear and geothermal. So next slide. So here again, this is some of the earlier speakers mentioned this. The basic need, we all need food, shelter, clothing, and fuel. And reducing human wants to absolute essentials permanently disconnects the individual from the fossil fuel industrial complex. And you can see, as shown in the view graph. And also the Walden diet, frugality, which you've heard about in our earlier speaker, frugality through localized vegetarian diet. Namely, he had a 2-acre bean field. This extract diet ranks highly for modern climate mitigation. Next. So in my book, Containing Climate Change to Save Us, I cite Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. And it ranks 100 ways to reduce global warming. And you can see the utility scale photovoltaic panels for electricity, which you saw on my slide earlier. But here's something we can all do in our starting with our next meal: plant-rich diets to stop methane emissions from animals. You know, it comes out both ends. The greenhouse gases come out from the manure and also from their digestive system. Reducing food waste, and then electric vehicles. I arrived here in my Chevy all-electric vehicle, which now has a range fully charged of 300 miles, high-efficiency heat pumps, and geothermal energy. Next. So anyway, in summary, we basically need to get solar energy from heaven rather than fossil fuels from hell. Next. My conclusion. Healing our economy will heal our ecology. A broader 52-year perspective containing climate change is new technology, caring philosophy and theology. Obviously, Thoreau's philosophy played a role here. But new technology, caring theology, enabling economics are needed to save our ecology. So I could have one more. Do I have one more here? Oh, well, this is this is an alternate title to my book. I don't know whether you people like it, but I got involved, as probably a lot of you older people like me probably remember, waiting in gas line in 1974 when there was an oil shortage, waiting hours in line to fill our gas tank. That's how I got involved. And I started my toil against oil at that time because I knew it was a limited resource. But I didn't know about, at that time, it was not until Jim Hansen noted that the burning fossil fuels and the greenhouse gases are warming our planet, that I realized that was another reason for cutting back. And so that's why I said, so in addition to toil against oil, I realized that we also had to do it so we wouldn't boil. And if, I came in down here at noontime, and it was really, really hot out there. And so, well, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Next up, we've got Alissa O'Brien. And while she's coming over, let me say that at Thoreau Farm, we entered into a partnership with a solar panel company 10 years ago. And something like 85% of our, look at that, our energy costs are covered 100% in the summer, 30% in the winter. Tuck that in there. Sit back in.
How you doing? Yeah, straight. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Hello. Okay, here we go. Okay. None can be an impartial or wise observer of human life, but from the vantage ground of what we should call voluntary poverty. When I shared I was going to be speaking about voluntary poverty, I got a lot of guesses of what Thoreau might have meant. He could have been referring to the idea of a vow of poverty, abstaining from wealth, and that would make it voluntary. Or maybe he was talking about the plight of those born in poverty or who are unemployed. But there's nothing voluntary about that. Maybe Thoreau is speaking about voluntary poverty as a concept to be debated but not practiced, because who would volunteer to be poor? I am an artist. Voluntary poverty is my life. I believe I have some idea of what Thoreau meant. I chose to be an artist, which is not exactly a high-paying position, but I volunteered to live this way. I'm frequently asked, how do you make a living doing that? I have to admit that it's very difficult sometimes. As it stands now, I should probably have some kind of a tip jar because I need to afford the gas to go home. My poverty has been a result of my decision. So that would make it voluntary, but I never intended to be poor because being poor sucks. Not knowing whether you're going to have enough money is a constant worry that hangs over me. It affects every decision I make, and when I see others going about their normal lives, working and earning money, and even wanting more than they already have, while I go without, I'm very frustrated, discouraged, and it's humiliating. Voluntary poverty feels like a self-inflicted wound because I chose this. When I chose to be an artist, I chose to be poor. Sometimes I don't feel like it's a choice, but it's my fate. Because I can't live any other way. I found that the 9-to-5 way of living was dreadful and pointless. I needed to follow my passions for creating art. Being poor feels like a failure, like I haven't earned enough money to validate my way of living. I was naive, thinking that I would be rewarded for living authentically and deliberately, but instead, I got poverty. I'm tired of being poor. I find no value in it. How could it possibly be the vantage point that Thoreau had promised? How could being poor make me a wise observer of human life? I was in a laundromat, regretting my life's choices, feeling hopeless. I worked so hard to get to where I was, but I had nothing to prove. I had nothing to show for it, rather. I was in a laundromat. I was failing as an artist, but I could not return to the life that I left because I could never do that again. None of this made any sense. Suddenly, I remembered something that Thoreau had wrote. However mean your life is, meet it and live it. Do not shun it or call it hard names. Love your life, poor as it is. I followed Thoreau's advice and decided to consider the value in being poor. Why not? Because focusing on poverty allowed me to only see what I was lacking and how hopeless my situation was. Consequently, that was what was keeping me poor. If I could see poverty from a different perspective as a vantage point, rather than being at rock bottom, maybe it could teach me. Maybe I could make sense of the poor situation I was in and possibly even change it. Maybe I'm biased, but being poor has taught me that money is truly the root of all evil. People claim that money is just a currency, a thing that we all use, although Thoreau made it clear when he said, men have become a tool of their tools. They say that money isn't evil, but the people who love it so much that they'll do horrible things to get it, keep it, and even get more of it. All this is true, but I say that the real evil is the importance that we give money. Everything is about money. Money is a currency. We exchange it for what we need to purchase what is important. So it's a necessary evil. Nothing matters more than money because our survival depends on it. Money controls us. It has taken over our lives. It influences decisions we make and determines how we live, or sometimes whether we will die. I avoided becoming an artist for most of my adult life because I feared that I wouldn't earn enough money to live. It made more sense to work jobs that I hated, hoping that someday I would have enough money to live the life that I dreamed. Money was a permission slip. If I behaved myself and did what I was told, I would be allowed to do what I wanted. Like Thoreau said, we can't afford not to live in the present. I wasted precious time living a better life when I could have been enjoying life all along. We sacrifice our lives, we give our time, our labor, and we're willing to give more and more of ourselves, go against our own interests even, just earn more money. I am ashamed of some of the things that I've done for money. And I'm sure some of you have done the same. But we must earn a living to be able to live. The laboring man, as Thoreau said, has not the leisure for true integrity. He has no time to be anything but a machine. Believing that nothing is enough and that we always have to do more is what keeps that machine running. Thoreau said, society is sick, and the best are the sickest. Money is the sickness as well as the cure, on the assumption that we could always buy a better life. Thoreau famously said, the mass of men lead quiet lives of desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. Life has become cheap, and living has lost its value. Whatever does not produce money has no value. Someone who doesn't have much money doesn't have much value. Being poor is not only a lack of money, but it's a judgment about somebody's worth. My poverty is voluntary. I decided I should not exchange any of my life for money. It's hard for people to understand that I quit my job and a steady paycheck and to find value in creating art. That doesn't really pay very well. As far as everyone's concerned, I made a bad choice. For the most part, art is not important. It's seen as a luxury, and it's not a need. It's difficult to convince people to value art because there's more important things to spend money on, especially when people don't have any money for the necessities. It's a low-paying occupation that values ideas, intrinsic beauty, aesthetics, which are unintangible commodities for those who only see value in money. Meanwhile, the jobs that prioritize money are the ones that make most money. As an artist, my profession, like Thoreau's, is to be always on alert to find God in nature, to know his lurking places. What would be the likelihood of getting one of those high-paying jobs if I put that on my resume? The money culture rewards those who value money, power, and fame. They're considered ambitious and successful. so no wonder I'm poor. It is though society does not approve of me as much as I don't approve of it. Poverty is withholding money to show the error of my ways. If I continue to live like this, I will continue to be poor. From this vantage point that I was in, I felt that my poverty was permanent and fixed. What purpose was there in knowing any of this if nothing could change? It made me feel poorer than ever. It occurred to me, being an observer was not enough. I needed to be impartial. I needed to separate myself from the poorness of my situation to get a better vantage point. I decided to revisit the same quote that I remembered when I was in the laundromat. I went to the last chapter of Walden to read it in its entirety. I came across the passage where Thoreau gave his reason for why he left Walden Pond. He said, I left for the reason that I went. I had several more lives to live, and I could not spare any more time for that one. I needed to be reminded why Thoreau went to the woods in the first place. I had been trying to live deliberately, and it wasn't going well for me. And I had several more lives to live, but I was stuck in this one. After reading that passage, it suddenly occurred to me that the poverty that I had been experiencing was not pointless suffering, but a valuable tool, driving life into a corner and reducing it to its lowest terms. Being poor, having stripped my life to its essentials, was the only way to front the essential facts of life. Sure, my life was mean, as Thoreau said it might be, but getting the whole and genuine meanness of it was the only way to get to the truth. The poverty I volunteered for was doing what it was meant to do. It was exactly how what Thoreau had written. If you are restricted in your range of poverty, you are but confined to the most significant and vital experience. It is life near the bone where it's the sweetest. Simplicity, simplicity. As if you simplify your life, the laws of the universe will be simpler. Solitude will not be solitude, and poverty will not be poverty. Instead of cursing my life and calling it names, I met it, I lived it, and I grew to love it. So all I've learned from this was, in society, money is considered a standard for what is valuable. Wealth is how we measure success. But authenticity is the only thing of value, because everything considered important is artificial and cheap. Imagine for a minute if we were no longer to value ourselves, if we refused to believe all that we were told that we will lack. We would focus instead on discovering the value that we already have. What if we believed what Thoreau said? If one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will be met with the success unexpected in common hours. We would be able to see things objectively. We would understand that we don't lack anything, and that each one of us has always had more than enough. What if we stopped buying what society is selling? If we showed complete indifference, ignoring all manufactured concerns, not caring about what we should care about, not wanting what we are told that we need? If we rejected all that is dangled before us, and we don't care about the rewards that were promised. As Thoreau said, the life which society proposes us to live is so artificial and complex, bolstering up on so many weak supports. It would surely fall down. The power we all have is the ability to see through perceived wealth, to see that our lives are abundant. Each one of us has richness to contribute to the success of all. Money has significance because we give it the power. It controls us by making us believe that we have no choice and that we have no power, and that it's the only way. But as Thoreau said, there are many ways, as radii from one center. We have the power to believe in who we are and what we're capable of. This is the wealth that we possess for being ourselves. We can make a difference with the life we have been given, no matter how poor it is.
Great, thank you. Next up is Ken. Thinking about permission. Money is a permission slip. What are you going to tell us?
What do you think? All secrets. Hello, Thoreauvians. Okay, let's try that again. Hello, Thoreauvians. Let's try that again. This will be the last time. Hello, Thoreauvians. Much better, actually. That's pretty good. I have a lot of audiences that I carry on something like that with, and none of them are as good as you. Now, next slide. Gives you such power to say that. Thoreau Farm, the birthplace of Henry. I want those of you who may not know this, that's the house that he was born in. And that house was planned, they were planning to demolish it, I think. Is that right? Yep. Well, about what year? 2005, something like that? Right. But there were a group of Concordians, courageous, heroic Concordians, who said, no way, we must save that. Henry's the only one of all these famous literary folks and transcendentalists that were born right here in Concord. And so they got together and they made sure that did not go away. And I want Molly to stand up, and Nancy to stand up, because they're two of the heroic Concordians. Without them, this would be gone. And Joe Wheeler, the late, great Joe Wheeler, and Court, who's, where is he? Is he in the other room? Oh, traitor. Okay. I want to talk to you first about how I chose to write a book called Walden for Hire, Business Lessons for Henry David Thoreau. I have a day job or a day business. I'm a consultant that works with other business experts and helps them become what I call recognized, published thought leaders. And that usually means that they want more exposure in a certain way, and very often that way is to write a book and get a book published. And usually my clients are people who have not published a book ever before. It could be virtually any age. So I've been doing this for almost 30 years. And that means that for me, my head's always, since I specialize in business, my head's always in that space, business. How can we, and it's all kinds of businesses and all kinds of angles, but how can we advance the cause of business in a positive way? But although I've been doing that for 30 years, as Molly pointed out earlier, I think it was maybe 2015 or so that I was asked to join the board of trustees. And then a couple of years later, become president. And you said it 10 years. I can't freaking believe it that it was 10 years, but it was. And the thing about it is that as I got more and more involved in paying attention to Thoreau and to the others that were around these parts many years ago, I noticed that the Thoreau books about Thoreau, maybe they were because of our author events that we might have at Thoreau Farm, or just knowing that certain books have come out, they were never about business. They always assumed, I think, well, I don't mean there's not a they as much as probably a general they out there, that there was a sense that Henry maybe hated business, didn't like business, didn't like to work, hated technology, all of that stuff. And because I was focused on business, all of a sudden it hit me. I said, is it because he was so anti-business, or was it just that for whatever reason, authors, budding authors, new authors, just didn't see that as very important compared to all the other things that he did that were so great, nature studies and civil disobedience influence, and just walking to Mount Wachusett. He always did these great things. Is it really possible that he wasn't great in the area of business, work, career? So that's where it came to me. And I decided that I would investigate that, hoping, of course, that there would be a book in it, but I don't know. So I got together for lunch with Mike Frederick, who was Rebecca's predecessor. He was, for many years, the executive director of Thoreau Society. And I got together with him for lunch, and I wanted him to point me to some experts that could help me understand whether or not Henry had a business bent, or some articles, maybe some books or whatever. So Mike, those of you who know him, Mike can be the kind of personality that just sits there and kind of looks and listens and doesn't really say anything right away. And that's what he was doing with me. And then when I was kind of done with my spiel, wondering where I would go with this idea, he was just looking at me, and he just quietly said 3 words: begin with Walden. And I thought, begin with Walden? Well, I'd read the parts of Walden here and there, pieces of Walden, but begin with Walden, he more or less said, begin with Walden. So I went looking for my copy of Walden so I could begin with Walden and take a look at it from beginning to end. Next slide. And there's me again. Hello, Thoreauvians. I'm looking, no, back. I'm looking for Walden. I'm trying to begin with Walden. That, of course, as you know, is the cover of the book Walden. And not the cover, but the cover, the title page. And I found that, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit, Eric, that first chapter was the longest chapter, and it had a lot of good info in there. And it was titled, what? Economy. What is economy? Business, money, transactions. It was right there. It made it even more hard to understand how it hadn't happened yet that someone wrote a book about it, because here he started Walden and really used a lot of space compared to the other chapters to talk about his views on economy and business. And I think that some of the things that Alissa was mentioning were in there as well. One that jumped out at me was what Henry called the 4 necessaries of life. I always want to say necessities, but that's not what he writes. He says necessaries of life. Anybody know what they are? The 4 necessaries of life. You know, one of them or 2 of them, or would you say show business? All right. Well, I'll help you out. It's a good thing I'm not grading this. Good thing for you. Number 1, food and drink. Number 2, shelter. Number 3, clothing. Number 4, fuel. Speaking of oil. Fuel was a big deal to him, though, because he was very into warmth. He wanted to be warm all the time. Food and drink, I've always found that interesting because not so much the food, but the drink. Do you know what he drank exclusively? Only one drink. I don't know about his whole life, but certainly as when he was writing this in Walden, he revealed that. No, nobody guesses. Thank you. See, he's right in front of you. It was like a Jeopardy question. It's easy. Water. He'd water. I keep wondering if he drank tea as well, but it's water, isn't it? So so next. Okay. So what I'm doing with that old schoolroom back in Henry's day is to say that when Henry talked about economy and business and career and all, he did make a point of saying there were standards, and they're important for him. In fact, they're vital for him, and that meant standards like fulfillment, for example, that a life or a job was worth doing. Rewarding, not so much in terms of in monetary terms, but rewarding for the enjoyment of life and of the life of the job, I mean. And also knowing that you have a moral compass, moral, not just ethical, but moral, and it's important. It's really vital. So I flashed to a story about him that I learned in the course of the research, where he had actually gotten a job with Concord School Systems, and he was a Harvard graduate of 1837 at a time when there was a depression, and the depression was called the Panic of 1837. I think that's much more language that's more fitting than just saying a recession or an economic slowdown. It's panic. And he actually got a job here in Concord as a teacher. And that was fine with him because he liked kids and he liked to teach and all of that. But what was more important was that, unlike most school systems, he was able to maintain his moral compass because here in Concord they outlawed corporal punishment as discipline. Except that after some time teaching, they changed it on him, and he was told that he had to start rapping knuckles and inflicting corporal punishment in order to create discipline. Okay, so he was not happy about having to do that, but he had the school committee man breathing down his neck right in class, and he called some students up and he gave them real whaps and lashes and all, and he hated it, and he hated himself for it. And at the end of the day, he went to the school committee office and he said, "I resign, I quit, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do a job like this." They didn't change their mind, accepted his resignation. That in itself it tells you something about Henry and how he felt about work and about business. But it also is really interesting to know that at that point, that day when he resigned was only his 9th day teaching. He didn't give it a second chance, this is that. He just, I'm out of here, 9 days. So anyway, when he was, now he's out of a job again, and he doesn't know what he's going to do next. And he looks around the the opportunities in Concord Center, or Concord Villages, it was called then. And being a shopkeeper did not appeal to him. Being an attorney, let's say, being an accountant, none of that appealed to him. Working at the Colonial Inn, which was operating back then, didn't appeal to him. So he started to look within himself in order to understand what did appeal to him. And what appealed to him, mysteriously, was to get himself over to Walden Pond and create a business out of being there. As vague as that sounds, that's how he felt. So he got himself over to Walden Pond. The first thing he did was to start to build his cabin. And he built his cabin, and next slide, please. He built his cabin and meticulously kept track of all the costs that he needed to take care of. But here's the real question in terms of business. Might have been livable, but could a real business come out of his experience there? And even more so, could it be profitable? So I've got a couple of not chapters. Molly doesn't want to hear me say. I got a couple of chapters, paragraphs that will give you a sense of whether or not it was profitable. It's a subheading of the chapter I have here, Master Builder, Calculating Henry's Profit Loss at Walden, where I say business is all about profit. So to be genuinely deemed a success, an individual, team, or company must be able to translate their activities into positive ROI, a profitable return on investment. In that regard, Walter Harding, generally acclaimed to be Henry's foremost biographer, once declared that Henry's time spent at Walden was indeed, quote, a complete success, if relating its evaluation as a business. And that's great, but it still is a little bit like, how did Harding come to this judgment? So next slide, please. So I brought in, to help me out, next slide. Next slide. Tom Michelli, who is a longtime Thoreau Society member, and wrote an article for the Thoreau Society Bulletin about this very thing. Could you prove, or could he prove, he's an economist with the University of Connecticut, could he prove that Henry not only was a success, but was in fact a profitable success? So he did a lot of calculations that we don't want to get into, even if we had the time, and came to a couple of realizations. One is that the value of Henry's house, his cabin, was $28.12.5. The value of land was $20.20, and the total asset value then was $48.32.5. And what that amounted to when he calculated the ratio of Henry's net income to the total value of his assets, so wonky stuff, yields this rate of return on assets 6.0017%, which compared favorably to other occupations, such as farmers, for example, who were averaging more like 9%, and it was favorable. But the last paragraph here, to put a capper on that, is that it must also be considered that during his time at Walden, Henry also produced 2 books, numerous lectures, and countless journal entries that have been of incalculable value to subsequent generations of scholars, students, reformers, etc., not to mention the profits from sales of Walden. In this sense, Tom Michelli summarizes the rate of return calculated via the above more conventional data, quote, greatly understates the true profitability of Thoreau's stay at Walden. All told, therefore, it is safe to conclude that Henry's experiment was a complete success at all, and a profitable one at that. There really, there's more to the story, obviously, and we've got it all in here. But I'll leave you with the last quote to Henry. Skip forward. Go ahead, right there. This is something he said. I couldn't believe it when I stumbled over this. This world is a place of business, he said. This guy, look at that guy. He looked around and he said, this world is a place of business. What an infinite bustle. Some people say that was relating to how noisy it was starting to get, but I would maintain that he was saying there's a lot of busyness here, and I see this as something that we should all jump in and get our best from. Thank you.
Thank you, one and all. It is time to enter into discussion, and we've got a mic that will run around the room, if I can dislodge it. And Nancy will take it to you. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so 4 great talks. I have, it's not a single question. I have something that I want to offer and get a reaction from Eric in particular, but also from others, because I think it'll tie together several of the themes here. So when we're talking about, how do we solve the problem of economy and climate, your talk focused on the approach of virtue. And I think we could say that maybe there are 3 approaches: virtue, technology, and social organization. The virtue approach, I think anyone in this room would be really attracted to that. What can I do as an individual to make a positive difference that will improve my own life, make me a better person? But I think, and I wondered if you would agree that it can't be enough. So because of the problem, one of the problems being rebound. That is, if I decide I'm not going to drive a car anymore, I'm going to switch to a bicycle. All that gasoline that I'm not buying at the pump, because I'm not buying it, the price is marginally cheaper. It's more attractive to somebody else who hasn't made that decision. That gasoline will be purchased and will be burned. And so if that's not enough, we look beyond that, then we get to the question of, can we decouple economic growth from material throughput? And I don't know if there's I don't know the answer. I don't know if there's a generally agreed upon answer, but if they can be decoupled and what we really want is reduced material throughput, then what Paul's talking about, if we just change our economy, if we do some technological fixes, if we electrify, then we don't need to be burning carbon dioxide. We can do all the things that we want to do. We don't have to be better people. We don't have to improve our social organization. We can just keep going the way we're going, but we won't be burning fossil fuels and we won't be destroying the climate. Maybe that's good enough. I don't know. If it is, I think that's a technical question. If it's not good enough, then we have to fix the way our economy is organized, and that's really hard. And I don't know what it looks like, but I feel like one thing that I'd offer, one thing I'd put out there is that if you ask people on Wall Street, well, what's the purpose of economic growth? They'd probably say, well, it's for money, to produce more money, to make rich people richer. If they're being candid. If you ask someone in Washington, D.C., what's the purpose of economic growth, they'll say it's to create jobs. And so if we can cut it off there, if we can provide people with financial security by a guaranteed income or something similar, then that would give people more opportunity, people who aren't as wealthy in spirit as Alissa, to make the jump that she made, that Henry made, to quit the 9 to 5 world. If people had the economic security to quit that, then I think that would probably be a good first step towards reorganizing the economy that's currently driven by the financial sector. And I'm going to wrap up there. Well, I wonder, first of all, if Eric thinks I'm on the right track with the comments like that, and what he thinks of those different approaches, and others as well.
Yeah, the degrowth movement, about which I'm trying to write, is interested in all of those questions. Their argument is that it is not enough to electrify, to build solar, to build wind. We can't invent our way out, because even those things would then be subject to a growth imperative. That means you have to grow at a rate of 3% next year and 6% the year after that. And the world's a finite place with finite resources, and we can't continue just like always expanding, you know? And so they propose lots of ways to address that. We should reduce our work week to 32 hours. We should give people a universal basic income. We should electrify. We should have electric cars. We should build solar panels. We should do all that stuff. But we need to break what they call the growth imperative, which says that we have to pursue ever increasing GDP, which is an entirely artificial metric that's divorced from human flourishing. And so they have other measures to offer in place, the human wellness index or whatever, you know. Is it realistic? Will it work in time? Will it save the world from climate change? I can't answer that question, but I'm interested in the argument, because they say basically it's necessary. We can't just green capitalism and hope that it works out. We need something bigger, more dramatic. And then it becomes a question of whether or not we are willing or able to make that sort of a change, even if our lives depend upon it.
I like to comment, you know, there's a book you might want to check out. It was published a number of years ago, Limits to Growth. And the basic limit is natural resources. And they plotted, you know, all these, and the increasing population, but the sad prediction of this limited resources is by 1935, excuse me, by 2035, everything's going to start down. Population is going to go down. Population is already going down in the developed world. Population is going down. Our big agriculture is going to start failing. There won't be enough food, and there's going to be a food shortage. Basically, there's going to be a food shortage, and so I mean that's the prediction. And one of the authors, however, said of this, Mr. Groth said, there'll always be enough food for those who can pay, which is a very sad situation, but unfortunately true. But there are limits to the growth, because the resources aren't infinite.
Yes, thanks. Thank you for your talks. I do want to talk about degrowth more, because it interests me quite a bit. So this is mainly for Eric, but of course anybody can respond. How do you feel about the term degrowth? You know, I've been reading up on this a bit, and there's other terms. You've mentioned some of them. There's also post-growth. I'm fond of Kate Raworth's donut economics, and one of the reasons I like it, because she does the donut, and everybody likes a donut, so you don't get into, you know, the rhetoric of capitalism or socialism or whatever. So I've heard some criticisms of degrowth as a term. It's harder to sell politically. I also think we're headed towards a degrowth or post-growth world, because there's limits to growth, no matter, inevitably. Anyway, that's where we're headed. But I'm just curious to hear what you think about the rhetoric, and what's the best language to use to make this happen politically.
Yeah, there have been some studies done on that. You know, is degrowth a sellable term, or should you choose something different? In my project, I try to link it. And well, the degrowth writers link it to things like, you know, a tumor grows until you subject it to chemotherapy, and then it degrows. Problems grow, and then you degrow them. Ultimately, I'm not sure that like the terminology that you choose is really going to be like the make or break thing because there's so many other complications at work there. Um, I'm satisfied with it, but yeah, it's something. It's a subject of discussion and debate.
Oh, yeah, hi, David Ryan. Thanks very much for the presentation. Just to follow up a little bit on some of the themes that have been discussed. I'll preface it by saying that I've worked on Wall Street for about 40 years, still very active in financial services. And I've gone through the cycle of inflation. Alan Greenspan comes in as a central banker, gets a hold of inflation. We have growth. We have the 90s, and greed is good. And we continue on where there was a little more optimism in the sense that ESG was a good thing. Now, when I sit with hedge funds and they say, well, let's construct disclosure documents, et cetera, and so forth on the ESG, let's take the S and the G component out of it. And there may be some opportunities on some climate change related technologies that we would be interested in. But there's a different psyche to it. In other words, we don't really care if a board of directors has females or other minorities that are engaged in the managerial functions of companies. I'll even add to that in this current environment where, it's we talk about poverty, but to me, I think being rich is good and okay, but we have manufactured dark human beings even to be presidents of the United States. Should we just put capitalism on a tombstone and just give it an RIP and just say, I'm from New York, and there's an incredible amount of enthusiasm on a change of leadership that I find from a younger generation that says this is the way we have to go. Will you, for individuals, do you feel that capitalism is the way to kind of reorientate this thing or reorientate capitalism, or let's just call it dead? And why not say socialism is pretty cool, and that's maybe the system that we need to employ? If you have any thoughts, I guess, on comments on it.
Well, we had a Cold War, and Russia, had a controlled economy, and they felt that the capitalist world, the United States and Europe, would collapse, and it didn't. It happened to be just the other way around. So I think a form of, a lot of these slogans, but from my point of view, I've looked at some of the, one of our problems these days is political polarization, and it turns out that political polarization is proportional to the income inequality. That's another big problem, and that's directly related to the fact that it all started under President Reagan, who cut the taxes on the richest people. And that's when inequality started increasing, and that's when political polarization went up. So one solution is, as Biden put it, the rich should pay their poor should pay their fair share. To me, that's a way of making our present system work. I don't see communism coming back. The Chinese tried it, and they are now capitalistic. Russians tried it, and they're now capitalistic. But I think just simply making the rich pay their fair share would go a long ways to solving our economic problems and would help solve our polarization problem.
I don't hear anything radical being said here. We are rapidly increasing population, going towards 10 billion. And I have been saying for many years, if we don't voluntarily reduce worldwide population by half, Mother Nature will do it for us by starvation. So we need a one-child policy worldwide. It's a radical idea, and people aren't going to do it because they cling to their local tribal instincts. Oh no, we want a big family. But like I said, if we don't cut our population in half, Mother Nature will do it for us. And secondly, we have to put all fossil fuels, leave them in the ground. There has to be a complete banning on all fossil fuels, and as soon as possible. Now, those two ideas are, no, I don't have a question. I'm making a statement. I'm saying radicalism is in policy is needed, or else we're heading for certain disaster, because politicians and people are willing to accept that we're moving towards 10 billion people. Their attitude is, oh, we'll feed everybody. Well, it's not going to happen. There will be mass starvation, but nobody wants to admit it. So they're not willing. Back in the 60s, there was talk about the population bomb, and people were saying, we got to reduce population. That stopped in the 80s. Nobody talks about reducing population anymore. In fact, the Chinese are concerned because their growth rate is going down, their population. They say we have to keep up. Now we can't have the one-child policy anymore because we have to grow our economy. And to grow the economy, you have to have more people to work. Well, like I said, we have to go in the opposite direction. And nobody's saying it. Everybody's accepting that we'll have 10 billion people. And so that's it.
Thank you.
I think that's essential.
So I appreciated a lot of what you all were saying. Been a climate activist for years, and when you are disabled, you also get to walk in voluntary poverty, and you do learn a lot. So I really appreciate what you were saying, Liz. I was really enthralled with what you were saying as an artist. So I was at the State House the other day, and it just, getting into some good trouble in the People's Chamber. And we were working on the omnibus climate bill, or, whatever it was. And can you believe the word conservation and using less never came up? We're going to have more energy need. We're going to do this. And it was like, why, remember, like, reduce, reuse, recycle, like that basic thing. So I'm wondering if you all can comment about that in these incredibly capitalistic pro-buying times, about that simplicity and how maybe from a moral level we need an ethical level, we need some leadership on that. And I'm going to push back a little bit on my friend on population control. For me, it's more like resource. We need to use less and buy less things. Because people in developing countries, they use, maybe there's 10 kids or 5 kids, but they're using like, 1/8 of an eighth of what the average American would use. So if you could just comment about like ethical leadership in terms of simplicity and how you see that coming, I'm assuming ground up, but, I'll hear whatever you have to say.
I think the whole problem is just always wanting more. They think like a solution is to do more, to have more, to come up with a better idea. But I think that if you go backwards and you really look like within and you start taking away from things, I think you'll see the truth in that. Because otherwise you're just piling up more and more and more and more, and it doesn't get you anywhere. It just gives you more of a problem, basically. Exactly. It comes to the fact, like, people, I guess they probably think that more control is going to be the answer, but actually it's probably just letting go and trying to figure out from that way. I don't know. I'm an artist. I'm not a philosopher, and I'm certainly not an economist.